Making films is a challenging endeavor, and making films by yourself is something different altogether. In some ways, making a film by yourself is actually easier than making a film with a larger crew on a micro budget or no budget sort of scale. In my opinion, one of the most exciting innovations in jet engine and propulsion technology is industrial 3D printing. And the reason is, with industrial 3D printing, jet engines and propulsion systems are reduced to fewer parts. And in doing that, they become safer and more efficient because less can go wrong in this complicated mission critical machine that needs to work, or else the whole thing fails. The reason why I'm talking about jet engines and propulsion systems is when you make a film by yourself, you are essentially the engine that's driving the project. And the fewer moving pieces and parts there are of this machine, the less chance there is of it failing on you. And when you are the engine and the machine that's driving your film, it is entirely your responsibility to fulfill the role of all of these moving parts, regardless of whether or not you are skilled in them. So making a film by yourself is absolutely doable, but it is a little complicated. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set expectations. What do you want this film to look like, and what are you hoping to get out of it? If this is a learning process for you and you're kind of at the beginning of your filmmaking journey, those expectations should be to learn the different aspects of the filmmaking process, and your goal shouldn't be to come out with this amazing, perfectly executed film, whether it's a short film or a feature film. It's really going to be up to you whether you want to try to execute on a story that you have this burning passion to tell, or you're going to want to try with a couple of dummy films that maybe you're a little less concerned about how they turn out in the end, and potentially your expectation is just to reach that finish line. It's kind of like running a marathon for the first time. Nobody's goal running a marathon the first time is to set a record or to be able to place. Everyone's goal is just to reach that finish line and say that you completed a marathon. And I think that it's very similar with filmmaking as well. After you set your expectations for what you hope to get out of this project that you're doing entirely by yourself, your next step should be to assess your capabilities and your skills as a filmmaker. What I mean by that is, if you've made a whole bunch of movies and you know how your sound recorder works, and you know what microphone to choose, and you know how lenses work, and you know about all your camera settings, and you know all these technical components very intimately, and you've been through this before and you're seasoned at doing this, then making a film by yourself could still be a daunting task, but you're going to have the benefit of having already gone through a learning curve, a learning process with the technical components of making a film. Now, every new project that you start is going to have its unique challenges that you're going to have to face, and some of these might be familiar to you and some of them might be totally foreign, and you're going to have to devise a plan and iterate and think quick on your feet through the process. But if you've never gone through this process before, you're going to have the added challenge of having a learning curve in figuring out all of your equipment and figuring out what it feels like physically and emotionally to go through the process of making a film, particularly a feature-length film, because you have the added challenge of having to maintain stamina through a potentially grueling process and a grueling schedule. Compared to a short film that you might be making with just one or two other people over the weekend, that is a very different scenario than entering into a feature-length film production and post-production schedule. So you really want to assess what your skills are starting out, and then kind of match those with your expectations on how you want this thing to look in the end. Like I said, if you've never done this before, your goal should really just be to have something in the end and be able to say that you made a film, just as a marathon runner would be able to say they completed a marathon. Once you've set your expectations and you've assessed your skills, I would start setting some goals. And setting these goals should be kind of an easy thing, because you need to decide what success looks like for you. If your goal is to become familiar with the gear that you have, maybe you just bought this stuff and you don't know how it works and you haven't even opened the manual yet, and you want to make a film. The filmmaking process is really just kind of an experiment to teach yourself how to use all of this stuff and then to level up and say like, check, I made a film. Check, I know how to use a camera. Check, I made all these mistakes and I've learned from them now. Your goals are going to be different if you've made a bunch of short films, or maybe you've made a feature film before, or maybe you've had access to a crew. If you've had all of these people to facilitate these different roles in the past, but you still made some films, now you're going to be going on this journey alone, and you need to assess what success looks like for you. And the goal perhaps is to have a completed film and also to learn a whole bunch of skills along the way. When you're assessing your skills and the resources available to you when going to make a film by yourself, you really want to be honest with what your capabilities are and really be honest with what you're willing to go through to make this thing happen. So if you have the expectation to be, putting visual effects and to have kind of sort of more complicated post-production type of things happen in your film, things that will need to be created and can't just be recorded in camera during the production process, you really need to be honest with yourself and determine what you're willing to learn and how far you're willing to go to make all of this stuff happen. For example, if your film is a sci-fi film and you want to put a spaceship in the sky, if you don't know how to do that, and even furthermore, if you're not even sure what applications you might need to make something like that happen, if your goal is to learn these type of new skills and to challenge yourself and really level up through the process, then that is absolutely admirable. And I would encourage you to do it, because I've done that on my feature films. I just decided to go for it. And there were things that I didn't know how to do at the time, and now I do know how to do because I took that leap and because I challenged myself to do it. What I would suggest against is biting off more than you can chew. And just like a marathon runner, you're going to reach a wall where you're not sure if you're going to make it through this process. And if you've really kind of taken on too much and there's more that you can't do than you can do, and the learning process is really slowing you down and it's taking you a really long time, you might not be able to maintain that stamina through the process. I would advise trying to set these like realistic goals and trying not to learn too much at once unless you're totally comfortable with that. But in doing that, you need to be kind of prepared for the repercussions of this kind of larger learning curve. And that might be your film drags on for a little bit longer than you may like, or that you might not be able to achieve kind of some good looking visuals and other things that you had like hoped you might be able to learn how to do, and it just didn't kind of come out so great through the process. You have to be okay with that. And you have to kind of manage your expectations in what making a film by yourself might look like. It might end up looking absolutely amazing, or some parts might end up looking like a little rough around the edges. How you manage your expectations from the beginning are really going to determine how you react and feel about that when that happens. So once you've done all of that and you're ready to go out and make your film, I would suggest doing the easy stuff first. And this has been my experience, especially in between film projects. Whenever you're returning to a new skill that maybe you haven't exercised that particular muscle in a long time, maybe you've been grinding away in post-production or visual effects or like some sort of other skill for a while, and now you're returning to the production stage of a new project, you're really going to want to start with the easy stuff first to give you the confidence in remembering how all of this works and how it feels to be back into kind of that routine. Because over time, you might kind of forget these type of skills and you forget that muscle memory and you forget what that stamina feels like and you forget what being tired feels like when you're shooting all the time. You could kind of forget what that feeling is like if you're just sitting in a chair doing post-production for a long stretch of time and you haven't been on a set in a little while. If you're making a film by yourself and you don't have a crew or a team to kind of fill your talent gaps and to facilitate some of these things that you don't know how to do or maybe don't even want to do, that's kind of tough because this is what you've signed up for. You're gonna have to learn how to do these things and you're gonna have to grind through the process. You're gonna have to watch a lot of tutorials and you're gonna have to make a lot of mistakes, and you might even have to go back and do some things again. With some of the films that I've made, I've had to go back and do some reshoots on things that just didn't work out for varying circumstances. Maybe the location wasn't what I had expected because I didn't have a location manager, or I didn't have a team of people to kind of help me through that process, and I had made assumptions before I went out to shoot that were incorrect when I got there, and I had to improvise, and some things just didn't work out very well. And that is totally fine. That happens on larger shoots too. So this shouldn't be really anything surprising if you have to kind of redo some work because it didn't work out the first time. This is going to be a profound learning experience, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be tiring, and there's going to be times where you're going to bed very, very late. All the feature films that I have made by myself, I have made while working one or sometimes even two jobs in some cases. I have a full-time day job that I've been working for many years, and then for a number of years while shooting my latest feature film project, Transmission, I took on a part-time teaching job, teaching postgraduate level visual effects while working a day job while shooting a feature film. So you're going to have to kind of power through this. And if you're shooting a short film, then that's going to be a little bit easier. But if you're shooting a feature film by yourself, you're going to really need to kind of maintain this discipline and this stamina and be prepared to be tired and be prepared to be totally worn out. And you just kind of need to keep going and power through it and get to at least the post-production stage, which is a whole other deal. I feel like a lot of filmmakers who go out and try to make films by themselves are successful until they reach the post-production stage. And this is a stage where a lot of filmmakers get tripped up. The technical proficiencies that you need to have kind of skyrocket exponentially in the post-production stage because it is far more technical in a way. You need to know a lot of applications, and you need to understand how plugins and all of these things work. You've recorded camera files and sound files, and if you're mixing visual effects into the work, that's an entirely added complexity that you need to be very comfortable with when taking on this type of work by yourself. So if you have a background in visual effects, and I strongly recommend that you teach yourself visual effects as an indie filmmaker, if you have this experience, then you kind of build the confidence to be able to achieve some of these higher level, more complex post-production tasks that if you don't have experience doing this type of stuff, the learning curve is going to be monstrous, and it's going to be very intimidating when you reach that stage. And if you're making a film entirely by yourself, you're going to reach a point where you either can do it or you can't do it, and you need to learn all of this stuff from scratch, and you need to start teaching yourself and practicing. And you might realize that your post-production schedule has come to a screeching halt because a lot of these tools and techniques and processes are going to be totally foreign to you if you don't have a base or foundation in visual effects already. So by this point, I hope I've kind of given you an idea of what it's like to make a film by yourself. This could probably be either a 10-hour long video or many, many different videos. And I think I'm going to try to isolate some of these topics and make kind of more concentrated videos on particular things such as sound and such as the post-production process and visual effects. I've already made a video on locations, and you could check that out. The kind of conundrum of filmmaking is there is so much to learn and so much to know. And traditionally in the filmmaking process and industry, these skills are broken up into all of these different departments amongst many, many different people. And it traditionally has not really been expected that one person know how to do everything. So if you're going out to make a film by yourself, that expectation is really something that you're signing up for. And if you kind of refuse to learn something, or you're not interested in a particular discipline within the filmmaking process, then your film is really going to suffer because of that. And in the case of something like sound, that can really be detrimental to your film if you don't pay that craft the proper attention that it deserves, because it is such an enormous part of filmmaking and of the final product and of the audience experience. You really need to take some of these things very seriously if your goal is to come out with a high quality, polished product in the end. So please leave me a comment if I forgot to mention something important, or please leave me a comment if there's something you want me to talk about that I haven't mentioned yet in either this video or other videos. It's hard sometimes to organize a lot of different thoughts and experiences into like one kind of short 10 or 20 minute video. The filmmaking process is a complex, lifelong learning experience, and if your goal is to not just be a screenwriter, if your goal is to not just be a director, and you're going to be like kind of a renegade, like jack of all trades indie filmmaker, then there is more to learn than you probably ever thought. And I'm going to try to make as many videos on this stuff as possible. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.